That's
The dawn of a new age.
Oh my god.
Greetings, friends, listeners, close pals, any peeps that may be listening. My name is Chase, and this is the New Age Comics Podcast. I like to talk about some comics here. Fortunately, I got a big-ass stack of comics to talk about. Let's hop right into them, shall we? I'm going to begin with some Marvel books this week. I'm just kicking off straight up. No, I had a decent morning. I had a soggy bowl of Raisin Bran cereal, and now I'm drinking some coffee. And I have class here in the next 50 minutes. So we're going to try and do a recording expediently, I think is the correct word usage. But like I said, we're hopping into Marvel books immediately. As per usual, we're just talking comics from a few weeks back. I titled the last week's episode, Last Week's Comics Tonight. This will be another version of that. So let's get into these books. These are from 324. There was one book in particular that I was pretty excited to check out for sort of no reason, and that book was Alien issue number 1. So Marvel recently acquired the rights to the Alien, as you all know, or hopefully know, right? The 1979 roughly movie titled Alien, of course, introduced, I guess, the xenomorph into, I don't know, the world. And Dark Horse has had the rights to Aliens comic book rights for the past long time. And so it's pretty significant that Marvel is kind of taking the helm of Alien, if you will. The Alien verse here is getting taken over by none other than PKJ, Philip Kennedy Johnson, and then with the amazing art by fan favorite Salvador LaRocca, and then colors, of course, by Guru FX. Now, I will say I have never, ever done more like pre-reading or pre-research into one singular comic issue in my life, because I had never seen any of the Alien movies. I am a youngling. I was born late 90s, almost into the thousands. I apologize for making everyone throw up in their mouth a little bit there. But I hadn't seen any of them. So I actually took some time, as I documented on my Twitter. You can follow me at New Age Comics Pod, just to show that I was watching Aliens 1 and 2. I guess I should specify Alien 1 and Aliens, which is the sequel. I really liked both of them, but that being said, I'm brand new to this Alien franchise. So I was really excited to dive right into the book because I loved the movies. I knew I kind of would. I'm a sci-fi horror geek. It really wasn't much of a surprise. This first Aliens book takes place about 21 years after the events of the second movie, Aliens, which is significant. I only watched the first movie. A bunch of people said, no, you have to watch Aliens. I said, all right, and I tried it. But other than giving us kind of just a brief timeline, there's not a lot of movie connections we get here. We meet a whole new cast of characters. Our main here is Gabriel Cruz. He is retiring from the, I was going to look up how to pronounce this, but the Weyland-Yutani, I think is how you pronounce it. And he's heading back home to Earth. And also his son is like an anti-corporate fuck. And there's a lot of stuff going on between him and his son here. This book actually took a different angle than I was expecting. I think it got a little more into the politics behind everything than it did some of the alien ass-kicking action, if that makes sense. However, there is plenty of action. There's an insane climax here at the end. I kept checking the rating of this book. God damn, I thought it was a rated R book or something like that. They kept dropping, S-bombs, and there was some crazy blood and guts in this book. So is this a new Max book? No, it is not. But given the movies, we may see a little bit of more, I guess, rated R-ish content here. But there were a lot of interesting connections to the movie as well. Bishop, right? You guys remember Bishop from Aliens. He was the AI synthezoid. He appears in this book. I had a lot of fun with that. I'm going to have to do more research into the timeline because I might get lost. I don't know when, this event is going to line up with like the events of Alien 3 or whatever. I'm not sure who this alien woman is in the beginning of this book. It totally beat me. I just hope we end up seeing Sigourney Weaver at some point. That will really make my day. But a book that we will probably never see Sigourney Weaver in is my next book that I'm talking about, Carnage, Black, White, and Blood, issue number 1. I'm sure you all know the drill at this point. Carnage, Black, White, and Blood, big-ass creative team, the new Marvel anthology colorway type series. Wolverine just had a series with the exact same name. I was a fan of the Wolverine series, and now it is Carnage time. We got 3 stories in this first book here with some pretty big writers. We have Teenie Howard, Benjamin Percy, and Al Ewing. Definitely some A-listers over at Marvel. But I won't lie, I felt like this anthology book was a little mid for me. And there's some pretty quick reasons that I have for thinking that. I mean, first and foremost, the Teenie Howard story seemed to be a Maximum Carnage tie-in, the 90s Carnage event. I'm pretty sure the event that Carnage was conceived within. I have not read that event. So to me, that story was, while cool, a bit of a throwaway. And to anybody who knows the contents of this book, I could not figure out how to read the Al Ewing story, which basically it was one of those like choose your own adventure comics. I've never read one of those. I think it has something to do with like a dice. If you roll a dice, you maybe hop around between panels, given the number of the die or something. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. Plus, I did not have a die at the time that I was reading this book, nor do I think I have any dice. So I did skip the Al Ewing story. Apologies, Mr. Ewing. But I will say this, though. The Benjamin Percy story was amazing. I, frankly, am not disappointed in my pickup of this book simply because of the Benjamin Percy story. It's pretty much a mini starring Sam Elliott, the famed actor. And Sarah Pichelli does really great on the art here. And it's this wild story. This old-ass, like, sheriff goes to fight Carnage in a cave and ends up becoming like the symbiote writer. It is totally crazy. I thought that was a neat little mini. The other two, and not so much. But that's the great thing about these anthology books is the next issue is going to be completely different. New stories, new creative teams. I'm excited for it. More on some symbiotes. Let's move into Savage Avengers issue number 19. This is written by Gary Duggan, drawn by Kev Walker, of course, and then colors by Tartaglia here. So Savage Avengers 19 is the last King in Black tie-in for this series, unless we get like a King in Black Redux or something, in 20 more issues and do a bunch more tie-ins. I doubt that'll happen. However, we've been tying in, I think, for the past 4, maybe 3 issues, and ultimately, I think the King in Black stuff for Savage Avengers was Duggan's like sandbox. That's kind of what I'm walking out of these tie-ins thinking, because in this issue you're gonna find Conan the Barbarian, Deadpool, and the Marauders pretty much fucking up, fighting some goopy goons. That's the whole event. I mean, King in Black, more like King of Goop, and Duggan is just like literally taking all the characters that he's used to and saying, I'm going to throw them all in the same book and I'm going to kill Deadpool once or twice. I thought it was fun. And not only that, Iceman really shows some of his OP-ness in this issue, or his power levels are very apparent. But I did think there was an interesting ending here that was worth pausing on. Conan has pretty much the biggest nuts in the entire Marvel universe because he waltzes right into the Hellfire Club and he's having some drinks with the squad. I did not see this coming because he straight up just claims the Hellfire Club. He turns to Wolvie and he's like, hey, this castle's pretty neat. It's mine now. I mean, it was pretty badass, I won't lie. But he's acting pretty savage right now, I won't lie. It is Savage Avengers, that is the book title. But geez, come on, Conan. He could save some savagery, I think, for the rest of us. But let's not forget here that Conan also is wielding a symbiote, a bit of a symbiote now, given the events of King in Black. I mean, that's obviously going to affect Conan's story from here on out. I'm just interested to see exactly how he's seems to be acquainting himself with, to put it lightly, with a lot of the Marvel universe at the moment. So I'm very curious to see how they acquaint themselves backwards. Now, I'm going to acquaint myself with the next book I'm going to be talking, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy issue number 12. So this is Lift Off in 1. But not only that, this kind of marks the year one mark of Al Ewing's amazing Guardians run. It has been really insane. This has been a pretty wild year. This specific issue is titled "The Time for Mercy is Past." I love how Ewing is doing these like episode titles. He's pretty much taking one quote from anywhere in the book and making that the title. Of course, given the plot of this book over the last year, we are getting the final showdown between our Guardian friends, the ever-growing Guardian roster that just is picking up more and more people by the day, and the corrupted, fucked up Olympic Pantheon. I know if these things aren't displaying to you how weird this run is, just keep listening. This issue wrapped up so crazily. It felt like I took a whole tab of acid from reading this issue. But that being said, I loved it. I love how fucking weird this Guardians run is. I think it's perfect, given sort of just like, I don't know, I guess you could say the norminess of like the Guardians movies. The Guardians movies are pretty family friendly. Kids love the Guardians movies. Kids love Baby Groot. But, Baby Groot, he's not in this comic. Groot, in fact, is in this comic. And he is on some crazy shit. I'll talk about that more in a second. But like I said, this episode is an acid trip because Hercules, he gets like launched out of this like cube or something and turns into like a energy lion. Of course, Moondragon is trapping like Olympic gods inside of words, if that makes sense. I really don't know how else to describe it. I feel like you just have to be reading this comic series to know what I mean. Like literally traps somebody on the letter of a word. It was pretty fourth wall breaking. And not only that, I think my favorite moment of the comic was when Star-Lord, he takes out his nifty Star-Lord gun and shoots like a chakra bullet through the astral plane into Zeus's heart. I'd like to pause on what I just said because that's fucking nuts. And I should never say those words in tandem in a podcast. However, I mentioned Groot comes back, and he does come back. He seemed to die in the last issue. It was one of those kind of like, okay, we'll see. But he gets brought back here via the Power Stone. I thought was an interesting reference point. We haven't seen a lot of Infinity Stone action over the last year. Maybe Ewing is kind of gearing up to deal with that a little more. But then the book ends with a neat little flash forward, and the Guardians are legit now. This is clearly the beginning of a new era for our goons. And yeah, I mean, just an amazingly psychedelic year one that this Guardians run has been. And as you all probably know, they're doing a huge kind of reboot of the Guardians series with issue number 13. I think it's going to be interesting. Moving into the next book, we got a finale here. I'm very excited to talk about this. And it's our last Marvel book of the week. I had to end on this one, y'all. Taskmaster, issue number 5. This is written, of course, by the amazing scribe Jed MacKay. The art, of course, is by Alessandro Vitti, and the colors are by Guru FX. We're always talking and praising Guru FX on this podcast. But this is the finale here of the Rubicon Trigger arc that was provided by Jed MacKay, of course. Given, the Taskmaster inclusion into the Black Widow movie, we got a Taskmaster series. And I'll just say it has been one of my favorite little mini-series coming out from Marvel easily over the last 5-ish months. So I was really excited for this finale here. How did it wrap up? I thought it wrapped up pretty good. This issue, I mean, it pretty much was just a payout for everything that we kind of saw Task do up to this point. If you've been reading this series, you know that he's just been going on missions, I guess. He's been having to track the kinesthetic signature or some comic book term of a ton of different super spies. And this is all to unlock some kind of crazy weapon by Norman Osborn called the Rubicon Trigger, some sort of sword, hammer, death device type thing, typical comic book things. And of course, Black Widow has been trailing Task this whole time. We get to see them fight here. It was a pretty dope fight. Nick Fury is present, of course. And I'm just going to get into the spoilers here. There is another S.H.I.E.L.D. agent that is quite significant that comes back seemingly from the dead. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. And that is Mariah Hill is back. And can you guess it? She was behind everything the whole time. It was an interesting ending. It sort of was one of those things where Mariah Hill wanted to open the Rubicon trigger, so she faked her death just to get this whole scenario kind of going. It's a really interesting approach to the end of this book. And, I have here, it was a little status quo. I won't lie. It was a tad on the status quo side. I'm not a fan of that. However, it's understandable here. It's a mini series. The ending was hilarious nonetheless because Taskmaster is such a fuck. He just wants to fuck with everybody. And that's exactly what he goes out doing. He goes out being a bastard in this last couple pages here. It was quite glorious. I loved this mini series. I really hope everybody here listening has heeded my words over the last 5 months and gone and checked out Taskmaster. But if you haven't, it's not too late. Once the trade comes out, I will probably be shoving it down your throat. All right, fuck a Marvel comic book. Let us talk about some other comic books from other publishers that might not be Marvel or DC. That's right, my friends. Let's talk some indie comic books, my favorite comic books in the stack. I got two here from some very unique, interesting publishers. I'm going to start, I think, with the most unique and interesting, and that is with Aftershocks Shadow Doctor issue number 2. This is written by Peter Calloway, drawn by Georges Genti, and colors by Juancho. I have to shout that because it's in all caps and it has an exclamation point. So, wow. I mean, I raved about the last issue of this book. It's just such an interesting book. I mean, for those who don't know, it is more of a low-key book, right? Aftershock. So sort of one of the more lesser known publishers, but they're definitely coming up in the game right now. What makes this series so interesting and unique, and honestly, the reason that everyone here should be reading it right now, is it's based on a true story. In fact, we're led to believe by the writer, frankly, it is a true story. This is actually the story of Nathaniel Calloway, who is the grandfather of our writer here, Peter Calloway. It's an extremely interesting story of this doctor in the 1920s and 30s who couldn't find doctoral work because of his race, and so he fell in with the mob. And I mean, this is my main point of the book. That's sort of what I was going to spend the majority of my time here kind of speaking on. You forget that this book is nonfiction. Like, the whole time you're reading it, like it's such an interesting concept for a book. In this specific issue here, we focus a lot on something that was set up in the last issue, which is that our main Nathaniel, apparently was intertwined with Al Capone, which is just fucking nuts. First and foremost, I'm a youngling here, so I haven't seen all of the like gangster movies and all of that shit. So I don't know a whole lot about this whole, mob scene. But this is one of those points where it's hard to kind of keep in mind that this story is indeed nonfiction, or at least mainly non-fictitious. Like with Al Capone here, you really just start to think, okay, this is some made up story. Like, they're just using some classic gangster figures, who are we going to see next? Ha ha ha. But no, like this book, it focuses on such real aspects of the characters. And I guess I'm led to believe that some of these things are real. I'm definitely wondering about the realism here. Like, we get a lot of scenes with Al Capone. And I thought it was just interesting to kind of focus on this character who is almost like mythic in American mythology. We talk a lot about Al Capone. He's sort of arisen to this like fictitious figure. But we forget that he was a real person. It was just really interesting. And I also thought that the introducing anecdote of this book was super fascinating. It was Nat kind of having like a young relationship with this white girl in his town. And ultimately, this led Nat's father, so I guess Peter Calloway's great-grandfather, to literally buy Nat a bus ticket and ship him off. He said it was the last time he ever stepped foot in Alabama. So it's just getting so crazy here because our main character, Nat, is experiencing such like a I don't know, like he is literally experiencing almost the hero's journey. And it's insane because we kind of know it's real at the end of the day. And you know, that's what's amazing about comics to some degree is like art imitates life. I mean, quite literally. And so in this book, we're getting these real life anecdotes, but told artistically through the creative team here. Like seriously, I just love this book. I just think it's so interesting. It is absolutely something refreshing to have in your pull because it's not superheroes, it's not capes, you know, and it's not even like an image book that's just like emo and edgy. Like it's just a true story. So super interesting. I hope you guys give this book a shot. I'm moving into my next indie book here, and that is Blade Runner Origins issue number dos. We are following up the last Blade Runner Origins issue, which I really did like a lot. And I have to say, I very specifically did not credit the creative team the last time that I shouted this book out. I vividly remember, and I want everyone to know I'm sorry. So I'm gonna cite the full creative team here, full names and everything. This series, Blade Runner Origins, is written by Kay Perkins and Mello Brown, drawn by Fernando Daggino, and colors by our man Marco Lesko. He's doing the colors on the main Blade Runner series, so of course, shout out to him. This issue is following up, I think, on, you know, a very interesting spinoff, definitely, in the Blade Runner mythos comics right now. This is pretty much the story of the first very Blade Runner. We meet our main character here. His name is Cal Moreau, I believe is how you say his name. And he is straight up just continuing to investigate the first murder by a rogue Nexus 5 at the Tyrell Corporation. Of course, this is a lot of Blade Runner lore, so I apologize to my non-Blade Runner heads who are just getting indoctrinated here. But as for my thoughts on this issue, I thought it was okay. I think this one inched itself along. I kind of use that word purposely here. It did feel like it was sort of just inching the story along a little bit. I don't mean to downplay some of the events in this book because we do meet our murderous replicant rogue friend, but he's out for more blood. He captures his first victim's brother, and that's sort of the cliffhanger that we're left off on here is this replicant buck naked in the rain, of course, as all replicants do in the Blade Runner mythos. He extends his hand to the victim's brother. And that's sort of kind of our ending point here, while our detective, Cal, he's kind of disconnected from everything going on. So we get frankly a bit more backstory in this book. We kind of just move our pieces on the chessboard sort of just around. I anticipate we're going to get a little more backstory into Cal as the series goes on, because that was sort of my one gripe with this book. And it's really rare to hear me give critique on any Blade Runner book because they're all perfect. But I just feel like I wish I knew Cal a little more. I know that this is a 4-parter, you know, so it's shorter, it's not an ongoing, and it's not even like a 6-parter. So we're going to have to obviously do without a few of the, you know, theatrics. However, I would like to know Cal just, I think, a little more. I think that's the one thing like holding me back from being like, oh my God, Blade Runner Origins. Ah! You know what I mean? So that's my thing, but I hope you guys are checking out some of these really dope indie books. We're living in an awesome era to be an indie comic fan. Okay, bidding a fine farewell to our indie section. I will see you next week, indie books. But moving into our last and final section, I usually start with the DC books. This week I'm ending with the DC books, of course. And I have some interesting DC books to talk about this week, and I will just kick it right off with a book I was so excited for, of course, Detective Comics issue number 1034. This is, of course, by the amazing creative team that I think we're all familiar with at this point, and that is Markio Tamaki, Dan Mora, and Jordi Belair. So it is official now, is how I have written it in my notes, because you all might recognize this Dark Detective team from, oh God, I just gave away the sauce. It's the Dark Detective team. I just had a goof verbally. Now, this is the same exact creative team that was taken over Dark Detective back during the Future State era, which, as you all might recall, was pretty much the only Future State book that I thought was really, really worth it. Now, you can imagine based off of that, and then based off of my previous standing for the Detective Comics run that was written by Peter J. Tomasi back in the day, you can imagine I was beyond myself excited for this goddamn Detectives book, and just frankly for it to return. I honestly, at times, always enjoyed Detectives even more than Batman, the main Batman title, but that's neither here nor there. I was really curious, though, how Tamaki would kind of approach this run, given that she's sort of rolling out of Tomasi's run, because, it's not like this is Detective Comics 1. We're not restarting the numbering here. This is 1034. So I guess it implicitly is acknowledging 1033 and before that. But not only is she rolling out of Tomasi's run, but then the whole DC universe is goddamn different now. Is she going to be addressing Future State? Is she going to be doing something crazy or new with the Infinite Frontier? Well, my friends, let me just tell you, I think this book takes what Tomasi was doing with his Detectives run, and then just sort of realizes it fully. And not to say that Tomasi wasn't realizing it fully, because he absolutely was. However, I think this book doubles down on, I think, the aspects in Detective Comics that separated it from the main Batman run. I realize I'm speaking sort of cryptically here, but I'll clear myself up. This book sort of feels like the Bruce Wayne, I'm using like humongous air quotes right now, the Bruce Wayne / Gotham comic, right? Where the Batman run, written by Tynion, is, I guess you could say, the quote unquote Batman comic. So there's Bruce Wayne, there's Batman, they're sort of separate. Now, I'm not saying that, Bruce Wayne never becomes Batman in this detective comic. And obviously, the vice versa is also untrue. We see Batman dressed down into Bruce Wayne quite frequently in Tynion's run. But what I mean, though, is that this Detective Comics is focusing much more on the life of Bruce Wayne, not exactly what's going on with Scarecrow and Miracle Molly and the Joker War and Punchline and all of that. It's really getting into just like what is Bruce Wayne's day-to-day life. As you all might know, Bruce Wayne is actually in a really interesting place in the DC universe right now because he is broke. He's broke, which is obviously very unique given Batman's circumstances, billionaire, playboy, all of that. So he's living in the city. He has neighbors. We get to meet his neighbors in this issue mainly. It was actually probably my favorite part of the book. So I don't know. All that is all to say, I'm really loving it. I always loved how Tomasi's book felt just like a little more slice of life than the Batman title. And it feels like Tamaki is going to be making this detective's book even more slice of life. I think that's a good way to describe it. If you really like slice of life Batman, read Batman Detective Comics. But I mean, this is all complemented too by Jordi Belaire's amazing colors on Dan Mora's amazing art. The art here is just great. But Tamaki's writing is great too. There's some hilarious moments. Bruce, he just is like such a girl magnet, but he couldn't give a shit. That's sort of one of the running jokes in this book that I had a lot of fun with. And there's a lot of really, cool small details that are playing out throughout this book too. There's the party crashers. There are these like fucks left over from the Joker War. Bruce is building a bunch of miniature bat caves all over the city. The Mayor Nakano plot is kind of picking up. It's really interesting. I think this Detective Comics run is going to be super duper interesting. But then, of course, there was a Robin mini at the end, sort of my last point on here. And I mean, it was a really fun mini. It set up this character named Hawk. It seems super interesting. This is like the antithesis to Robin, maybe just like an assassin that's evil. but Damien's not too cool either. Too kind, I should say. Too good, too morally good. So we'll see how that works out. I'm very excited to pick up the Robin book and, of course, to finish this Detectives series. But let's move on to another series with an absurdly high issue count, and that is Action Comics with issue number 1029. I'm going to start actually verbalizing all the numbers in each one of these. Okay, so this comic is written by someone we talked about earlier in the podcast, and that is PKJ, Philip Kennedy Johnson, except this time he is not working with Salvador Larroca on the Alien title. He is working with Phil Hester and Hi-Fi here, taking on the Action Comics Superman mythos. So I've talked a lot about this Philip Kennedy Johnson Superman takeover. It's quite interesting. He is following up on his first Superman issue, which was the Golden Age Part 1. I think that was Superman 29. And here is the Golden Age Part 2. I thought that was an interesting choice. This is like a direct lead in from the Superman issue. Not exactly sure why he chose to do that. But PKJ is doing some interesting things with this run, obviously, given the direct lead in. But then not only that, what's going on in this issue is definitely going to have a lot of effects on the Superman mythos, right? I know I use that word mythos a lot. But mainly here, Superman is actually getting depowered, or he's getting powered down a little bit. And I think the main conflict and main crux of this issue is John Kent kind of anticipating the mantle or trying to take up the mantle. I really like this point of writing. I think it's acknowledging kind of something a lot of comic fans, longtime comic fans think, which is that, Bruce Wayne and Superman, they've been doing it forever. They're 80 goddamn years old. However, in the comics, they look like they haven't aged a day. Not that, comics have to be perfectly scientifically accurate, but I guess just in general, comic fans sort of just wonder like, okay, well, is Clark ever going to not be Superman? Is he ever going to get depowered? And I think PKJ took that kind of feeling that he probably has in himself and is sort of just bringing it to life, because obviously, as real life goes, I guess you could say your children sort of take up your missions in life. Maybe to some, not to others. But that seems like what PKJ is sort of steering us towards here, that John Kent needs to get ready to take up the mantle because Superman's days may be numbered. I have to say this, maybe in some closing thoughts, I'm kind of getting skeptical in how I feel about Phil Hester's art. I think it's okay. I think I could just use a little more detail out of it. And unfortunately, I don't know if this issue of Action Comics is as gripping to me. It did not grip me as hard as I think the Bendis run was at this point. The Bendis run kicked off immediately with like a ton of ideas, this like mystery. There's so much like going on already. Rogolzar and the fire problem. I'm trying to recall the beginning issues of Bendis's action verse. But point is, I don't know if I'm as gripped by the PKJ stuff. We will see. I guess it's controversial whether the Bendis is good or not. We'll see how it all goes. I did like the Mongol stuff that was set up at the end of this book, but again, we shall see. And lastly, there was a Midnighter mini in here, which I really dug as a mini. I hope that this mini continues to some degree, or maybe it'll get picked up into its own series. I'm not really sure, but I'm really liking getting to know Midnighter. He's not a character I have a ton of familiarity with. So that is always fun. But moving into a book that a lot of people didn't exactly have fun reading this week, and that is Teen Titans Academy, issue number 1. This is written by Tim Sheridan, drawn by Sandoval, and colors by Sanchez. So this is the new Teen Titans series, sort of, because it's not exactly Teen Titans. It is specifically Teen Titans if they were a school. This intrigued me enough, I guess. And then not only that, given the Future State Teen Titans book that I did give a shot and I thought was okay. It interested me enough. There was pretty much just a ton of crazy shit going on. It kind of ended in this like humongous fizzle and just said, how did it get to this point? Find out in Teen Titans Academy. So I was interested enough to just give it a shot. And ultimately it was a long shot because something just about me, I'm really not into like school books that much. I've made this apparent on the podcast before. For instance, like I passed on the Strange Academy, even though you all know I'm a huge Doctor Strange guy. It's just not for me. I just am really not into school books unless it's like X-Men, the classic, like the Xavier school I'm down with, I can ride with. But yeah, I don't know what it is. Just school books never really do it for me. And then obviously I'm not a Teen Titans reader. I don't probably have a huge Teen Titans reading fan base. So for a lot of reasons, this book was sort of a long shot for me to like. And unfortunately, I think I am left wanting just a little more out of this book. I don't know. I think it was just okay. It was a decent setup for a school book. Something that the Future State Teen Titans book did a lot of, and now this book I think is sort of trying to keep going, is this like Red X tease. We're getting apparently confirmation as to who Red X is, or he's getting introduced into the comics or something like that. It's sort of the selling point of the comic. If you can see the cover of Teen Titans Academy, Red X is on the cover. And so I get it. He is the selling point. I guess it's just getting a little much. I'm like, okay, give us Red X or give us something. I think it would have been like a strong lead-in for this series. Let's say like the students walk into the classroom and boom, Red X is right there. And he's like, I'm your teacher, bitches, sit down. Something like that. That could be fun. I don't know. I think the new class of kids got a lot of flack too. I mentioned a lot of people really weren't into this book, and that is very true. The day that this book dropped, I saw a lot of flack fly out for it. And, the new class of kids got a lot of it. I get it. Really, those are the new class of people is really the reason I'm not super into school books. Mostly the class is there rarely are characters that are introduced where you're like, oh, hell yeah, these are here for the long haul. So a lot of times they feel like throwaways. But that being said, like if you're a Teen Titans fan or like a TT head, I think you would really like this book because it almost is taking like Teen Titans and turning it like into a legit like setup. I don't know. It's where the original Teen Titans are professors here. And then there is like the actual Teen Titans who are doing missions. And then, of course, there's the new students. So it's sort of like bringing all the Teen Titans elements together. So that's why I say if you're like a really big Teen Titans fan, I think you would dig this. But of course, you would have to dig school books as well. Just a fair warning, I would give it a shot if it interests you. I think I'll be giving the next issue a read, and we'll see how I feel from there. But a comic series that is not going to be experiencing any kind of next issue is the next book I'm going to be talking about, and that is my last book, which is Batman White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, issue number 6. This is written by Katana Collins and Sean Murphy, of course, with art by Matteo Scalera and Dave Stewart. This is the finale of this crazy miniseries. It's been a part of the White Knight verse. It's this sort of Black Label alternate universe, Dark Knight Returns, except it's Sean Murphy type vibe. And in this issue, if you've been following it, we're getting the final showdown between the Starlet and Harley. And I thought this wrapped up pretty decently. Again, we had a weird week where we had a lot of status quo endings, unfortunately. That's my thing. I'm not into the status quo shit. And it was a little quick. I think the ending here, a little status quo-y, a little quick. But overall, I think this ending wrapped up really cute. It brought Harley into a like neutral place with her kids. There was some really heartwarming stuff here at the end with her and Batman. Which is kind of refreshing for the Murphyverse, because the Murphyverse, goddamn, it is kind of fucked up. I won't lie, it's very serious. And, Black Label obviously plays a big influence in it. So I kind of wanted to just take most of my time for this review, kind of just talking about the effects I think this could have on the Murphyverse. I'm really liking his alternate universe, and I love the prospects for it. It's taking so many different turns in the normal Batman canon. So I'm going to lay out a few of the things that I think are going to affect maybe volume 3 of Sean Gordon Murphy's White Knight, which is confirmed. So some lasting things I could see being relevant here are, first of all, just Harley Quinn's like new persona, new suit. She has this Harley Quinn noir suit. It's like black and white. It's very cool. I'm wondering if this signifies that she's becoming like a vigilante or something, because there's a letter here from Bruce where he says, well, I know Gotham's in good hands. I don't know if that means like, haha, you're Batman now, or what that could mean. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye out for. What is Harley up to? Obviously, she has 2 kids, so maybe not a whole lot of vigilante-ing. We will see. We do get some answers on Jason Todd in this issue. He was introduced in the last issue, of course, and the answers it seems that we get here is that Harley Quinn seems to be the one who, I guess, alerted Batman to the fact that Joker had kidnapped Jason and was kicking the shit out of him. So I guess you could say the way it compares to the main canon is that you could say Harley Quinn prevented the death in the family, right? Like a lot of Sean Gordon Murphy's plot points have been sort of like these twisted reinterpretations of key Batman canon moments. Namely, Curse of the White Knight interpreted the whole Azrael stuff. And so it seems that our interpretation here is that death in the family did not happen in the White Knight verse. Instead, Harley Quinn prevented it ultimately from happening, and kind of saved Jason's life, which is interesting because Jason, as we showed, was Red Hood in this book, but not like, I don't know, he wasn't like that evil. I guess he's the prison owner or warden or something. It's just interesting. I'm curious how this is going to play out with Jason Todd. As per the end of the last book too, Harley Quinn's hyena died, but now she has a new hyena. That's a very small point, but we'll see. Well, I'm curious, as Batman said, what the name of the hyena is going to be. And lastly, to address the literal final moments of the book, that is that Harley has new digs at a apartment that Batman owned, I guess, and it has a Batcave and everything. However, Batman is still in jail. And I wanted to end on this point because obviously that is going to be sort of the main points that get, I think, readdressed and picked up once Volume 3 starts. Assuming that Volume 3 takes place after this Harley Quinn book. It could, for all we know, take place at the same time. It could take place beforehand. It could pick up right where Bruce leaves off in Curse of the White Knight. It's very interesting. This is all the reasons that I really like this alternate universe. But this mini wrapped up really neat, I would say. So if you dug the White Knight verse or you're just really into Harley Quinn, I would say check this book out.
Well, this was fun.
Until next time.
And that is all I have for the book reviews this week, guys. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It means a ton to me. This is another episode in the books, episode 32 of the New Age Comics podcast. Wow, it has been a trip. Now, in my final moments here, of course, I'm going to give you my top 5 of the week. I am literally late for class as we speak. I should be in class right now. Luckily, it's a Zoom meeting, so the second I'm done with this recording, I can hop right into it. Now, for my top 5. I have an interesting selection this week, and, let's just get right into it. I'm giving my number 5 the bottom rung to a surprising issue, Taskmaster issue number 5. Now, that's not to say I did not like Taskmaster. Obviously, it's still in the top 5. But of course, I think the series in its totality is better than the final issue here. So the next book, I'm giving my number 4 to Shadow Doctor, issue number 2. Just such an interesting book, guys. You got to be reading it. I mean, rarely can you have a nonfiction book in your poll. That's all I'm saying. For my number 3 spot, I had to give it to my acid trip comic of the week, and that was Guardians issue number 12. Just such a trippy book, but I love it. I love all the art and all the weird shit. Whenever I'm reading it and I don't know what's happening, that means I'm enjoying it. So for my number 2 spot this week, I went back and forth between my number 1 here, but I think I settled on it. I'm giving my number 2 to Detective Comics 1034. I fucking love Detective Comics this week. Just an amazing book. I love the way Tamaki and Mora are taking the universe, and I really hope that it gets even more slice of lifey. You know what I mean? I want to see Bruce do some boring shit. That's all I'm saying. Moving into my last book, my number 1 of the week, my pick of the week. Maybe some of y'all will be surprised to see this, but I have to throw it to this one. Alien, issue number 1, PKJ, Salvador LaRocque. Man, I really liked this book. I think I'm sort of obligatorily giving it to Alien simply because it was such a journey for me this week. I watched 2 movies just to read that singular issue. So for that reason alone, and my recent diving into the Alien mythos, I'm giving it to Alien 1 this week. I really liked the book. Let's see where the series goes. And what's left? Well, I have to tell you what books I'm talking next week. Thank you to everybody who listened. It means the world. But here are the books that I'm going to be talking about this next week. Of course, these are old books, but that means I'm holding them all right now. So I'm going to be talking a big King in Black pull next week, and that is with a few comics. Of course, the Better Bill issue #1, spinning out of King in Black. Super pumped for that. And then the King in Black Ghost Rider, as well as the King in Black Return of the Valkyries. Pumped as hell for those. We got some big King in Black books coming up. Then in the Marvel realm, that's not all, because then we got X-Men issue #19, following up with the Vault Kids. Very excited for that. Then we got a few Image books this next week. We got Crossover issue #5, Department of Truth issue #7, and Two Moons issue #2. Of course, pumped as hell for those. Image has been just killing it lately. And lastly, these might as well be Image books, some Black Label DC books, my only DC books for this week. And that is Batman Catwoman 4 and Strange Adventures 9. Man, Strange Adventures is wrapping up. That's crazy. Well, thank you all so much for listening. It means the literal world to me. If you want to support the show, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can follow me or subscribe or hit the like button. People, I think, don't understand how much the like button actually helps. It really does. But, I'm going to get out of your hair this week. As usual, I'm shooting for shorter episodes, so I hope I'm making progress on doing it. So that being said, thank you guys again for listening. Means the world. I will see you in the next week with some more old books for last week's comics tonight, but we're gonna have a lot of fun. All right, I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.